Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have one of our favorite guests. We have Dr. Angela Celeste May. And of course, she's going to bring some wonderful information. Our topic tonight is resistance to change. But before I do that, I have to tell you who she is, and she wears a lot of hats. She has a background in clinical, organizational, and forensic psychology. She's currently the president of A.M. May and Associates, a counseling, consulting, and coaching company, a member of the board of trustees for the Michigan Health Council, a member of the Drug-Free Youth in Detroit Advisory Council, and she's also faculty at Wayne County Community College District. She is also an international vocalist, as if that was not enough. She is an instrumentalist and recording artist, founder and president of Celeste Productions. She is also an author of the book Freedom: What is the Experience of Living Without Negative Self-Imposed Limitations? And she's a public speaker. And she's with us this evening. Good evening, Dr. Angie. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Good evening, Kim. It's always great to talk to you.
It's great to talk to you. And, it's been a while since we've talked because I've been traveling and working and doing a lot of different things. But
yes.
One of the things that I noticed in my travels this summer, I had the opportunity of a lifetime to go to Cuba, which was amazing. And one of the things that was interesting to me about Cuba, they just got the internet a few years ago. They were not, because they are listed as a terrorist state because of a lot of political things. They are part of the countries that cannot receive assistance or help. They are blocked from a lot of different things. And what was fascinating was that they have their own Wi-Fi there, but they just got the internet. So they're just learning about different things. We started to learn as part of this was a work trip that I had where we were learning that President Obama had come in 2017. Jay-Z and Beyonce had come in 2016, I believe. And it was just interesting to see the celebrities that had come in and sort of the economic bump that they had provided during their visit, but how so much of Cuba is still the same. So I got a chance to ride in the old cars. And it's funny because this one guy who we were in his car, he said this was his grandfather's car. It had been passed down to his father, and his father passed it down to him. And so literally they take scraps from wherever they can get them and fix their car. So we were in this 1957 Buick, and
Wow.
yes, it was beautiful, just gorgeous. He had an MP3 player in there, and I was cracking up. And so, and then I was looking, and so his stick shift. So, in America, a typical stick shift sits on the floor. We'll do this whole thing with our hand. His was actually in the steering column. So where the older cars, where your grandparents would, pull the lever all the way down, and then you could back out, and then they push it back up so you could drive. That's where the stick shift was. And I thought, wow, ingenious that they did this in terms of trying to adapt to the conditions that they were in. And it got me to thinking, how many people could handle that? Being in a situation where change is not something that is your friend. You can't change because you are boxed in a situation politically, economically, mentally, geographically. Cuba is an island. And so people can't just leave if they want to. You have to have a passport or visa to come and work in the United States. And there was a young man. I had a lot of moments there where they were impactful because, as I was telling people when I came back, I never met a sad person. And I said, I know it sounds, like a stereotype. I said, but everybody there had joy. They had this inner joy that even when you looked, why are you living here? this is what the outside of your house looks like. They don't have screen windows and glass in their windows. They have bars and different things. But everyone was happy. And I had to step back and think about it. I have to look at it from their lens. But it got me to thinking about being resistant to change. Why is change such a hard concept for so many people? And I think Cuba is a perfect example of people who, because of things outside of their control, they haven't been able to change. It's almost like they're living in this time capsule. When we talk about oceanfront property, there is none. You know, people are in these buildings that look like they should be demolished, but when you walk inside, their apartments, their homes, gorgeous. Just there's artwork on the wall, there's beautiful furniture, there are all these things, and we're just like, wow. But then there are some things that are just, you know, untenable. You just you wouldn't tolerate it if you were here, like being able to speak up and say what you want. Not that you can't, and that's one of those misconstrued beliefs about Cuba. They do protest, but it
Mhm.
is carefully curated as to how they actually do that. It's not like in America where I can get on the Kim B. Davis show and say, blah, 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 this is how I feel. Now, you might get in trouble if you do that in Cuba, but here we can do that. But Dr. Angie, I know I just threw a lot at you, but talk to us about why people are hesitant towards change and why that's not necessarily a good thing for us.
Uh, why the hesitancy is not necessarily good for, okay. I
Yes,
should make sure
yes.
I'm clear, yeah. Well, you said some of it yourself. It's almost cliche that we say no matter where where you're from, where you're living. We say it here in America, um, that the human condition or the sort of like natural human inclination is to fear change because change represents the unknown. So
Mhm,
that we hear people talk about that a lot. It's almost a given, that people assume that, well, of course you might be nervous or fearful of change or even avoid it sometimes because the unknown is almost scarier sometimes than knowing it could be something negative. It's the unknown that could be so scary. Um, I'm definitely one who encourages people to not necessarily fear change. That fear, I'm sorry, fear that change can be, an opening of a new door. It can represent growth. All those reasons that we'll get back to that have to do with the second half of your question, which is why it's not necessarily a good thing or a healthy thing to
mhm,
have that fear. Um, but you also said part of the answer when you talked about how, quote, like I will quote the great Kim B. Davis from 30 seconds ago when you said, um, you might get in trouble if you say that, or you might get in
mhm,
trouble. So definitely, I think it's important to acknowledge that for any group of people, uh, sometimes the fear and the hesitancy, it makes some sense if you look at the history, if you look at the context, to give people their proper, so to speak, that while it's easy to assume that the fearfulness, from our perspective, like you were saying, we look at things from a Western perspective sometimes
mhm,
or from our own background, but in any context, actually, even in our country, and maybe I could say, especially in our country with our history and ongoing challenges with racial freedoms and the things that we're fighting for,
mhm, mhm,
um, we could understand from looking at the context that hesitancy makes sense if we understand historically. And like you said, even in the present, it can get you in trouble. Change can get you in trouble depending on what it is. Um, so the unknown, it representing trouble, quote unquote, are all things that, for the sake of like our need to survive and preserve and protect ourselves and our loved ones and our way of life and the things that we count on and rely on, for all of those reasons, I would say, and more, but definitely some of those reasons are why people are hesitant to change. Um,
mhm,
Change can also represent loss. which change is lost to a
Mm-hmm.
certain degree. Because to change, you're turning away from something to turn towards something. So that
Mm-hmm.
does often require letting go of something, whether the thing is letting go of ideas, letting go of traditions, letting go of certain concepts, letting go of identity, the way we identify ourselves. Um, it doesn't have to mean that, because we know that we can bring those things with us. Oftentimes, we know we can bring our traditions as we step into the creation of new traditions and celebrate both. So it doesn't have to mean that, but sometimes, maybe oftentimes, it does require a letting go in order to make that turn. So letting go of things can represent a grief, or a type of grief, or grief. It's a loss in some ways. So all of that can contribute to those hesitations, even if they're not largely conscious, but they're kind of there in the back of the mind a little bit. So for all of those reasons, I think that's why people, regardless of their history, their context, or their background, can be hesitant, nervous, and fearful about making changes. So some positive, or maybe we'll say some strengths in those hesitations, some resilience, some self-resilience that's weaved into some of that hesitation, are those things I was saying about preservation. Some of that hesitation makes sense, again, to protect, to preserve, to make sure that harm doesn't come to us if we think it's dangerous, to make changes. On the unhealthy side, of course, why that can be unhealthy for us is also what you said about the Cuban people, or at least the ones that you were interacting with, as a perfect example of, on the one hand, it seemed that they were really making the best of their situation, and where they were, both internally in terms of the joy that they were expressing, and all those things, as well as externally, like you said, they may have, I'm moving my computer around and not meaning to, sorry. They may have been in buildings that maybe the building, like you said, hasn't changed since 1953 and needs some change, but inside their homes, they made the best of them with the artwork and the furnishings, and like you were saying. Um, so what can be unhealthy, and in this day and age, psychologists, psychiatrists, all of those of us who are in the social sciences, or try to be more conscious of our, we don't want to have an arrogance, and make assumptions about different cultural perspectives. So we want to tread lightly, be careful about what's healthy and what's not healthy. But when saying that, but what can be unhealthy about that hesitation for change can be the things that you may never discover, the potential that you may never realize, the answers that you may never get to some of your questions. It requires risking to get some of those answers. It requires risking to make change in order to better your life, your family's life, and even to a larger extent, your community and society. So that those hesitations can be unhealthy, or even dangerous to your own, to an individual and to a group's survival, as far as their ability to step out of the known so that they can thrive. So when I say survival, I don't mean just getting by survival, but the growth that's required to evolve and keep moving forward. So it can be unhealthy to have to cling to those fears, even if the fears might be grounded in some reality and some real dangers. I guess I could say confronting or addressing the fears and finding ways to creatively, we know people of color around the world are just so creative in so many ways, and some of those you already talked about a little bit, from the gear shift to everything else, to think creatively about how to confront those fears in a way that will allow us to continue moving forward and to grow. And when I say continue moving forward, I don't mean that you have to just let go of all of the wonderful history that you bring with you, but parents, grandparents, great grandparents, what do they always say? we want our next generation to be even better than us, to grow even beyond what we were able to do, to envision themselves as being all that they, want to be. And if we don't confront those fears and hesitations, we're not going to get those answers. We're not going to realize those potentials.
Mhm. Excellent points. And so you brought up politics. And so, of course, that is my next question. So
Okay.
we see here in America, we have this phenomenon called the Trumpers. And these are people that are diehard Trump, love this man, Donald Trump. They love him, believe everything that he says, follow his ideologies. And this whole notion of everybody is unfair. You are being shafted, that there is some grand conspiracy. Now, if there is some grand conspiracy, I highly doubt that, he would know about it. I just don't think that he's intelligent enough to know about it. And I said that. That was Kim B. Davis said that. So, this is my show. I say what I want to say, and I said that. However, one of the things that is troubling right now is this constant accusation that the election was stolen, and the number
big
of
lie.
people, the big lie,
The big lie. Yes.
the number of people that have been caught up in it, who have been indicted, who have been caught on the phone in an actual conversation trying to get people to find votes, including Donald Trump himself, and the other people trying to make actions happen on the election day during the transfer of power from one president to the next president. It is jaw dropping. And I started to think about the same thing when I came back, because Cuba has racial struggles too. I don't think there's any place in the world that doesn't. Everybody has a caste system, and I use that word very intentionally. Dr. Isabel Wilkerson has written a book called Caste. If you have not read it, I strongly encourage you to. It is a brilliant read. It talks about, it compares the caste system in India to the caste system in America in terms of what it's like for African Americans, and how so many things from slavery contributed to that. But we have these people who will say they stole the election and pinpoint it and say it's Black people. And I'm like, okay, well, the last time I checked, none of us can sway an election, even if we wanted to. Even when the popular vote went to Hillary Clinton, she still didn't win because of,
The Electoral College.
yes, thank you, because of the
Mhm.
Electoral College. And I'm like, you have to understand who those people are. I said, that's not necessarily us. Yes, that
Mhm.
includes elected officials. I said, but you have to look at what the vast majority of elected officials are. When you look at folk of color or African American folks, we make up a small percentage of that. And it's interesting because I thought back to President Obama when he had made a speech about how global economics were getting ready to change. He said, listen, coal is going away. You need to let it go. We need to do green energy. And people are like, oh no, give me my coal. My great grandfather, my grandfather, and my father all survived in coal. Okay, well, now this is, whatever year that was. And people just were very angry. And one of the things that I thought about as you were saying that, global economic anxiety. Everything that happens here is connected to what happens in China and Japan. Everything that happens in China and Japan is connected to here. Whatever happens in Europe is connected
Mhm.
to here. When Great Britain decided that they were leaving the European Union, everybody's like, oh, what's that going to do for the dollar? Now all of a sudden we have a new coalition of countries calling themselves the BRICS. And now they're like, well, we're positioning ourselves against the dollar. So, oh, here we go. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people and a lot of industries you know, my friends and I will have conversations. You know, when you call your phone and you need to speak to somebody and you yell into the phone, "Praise that." I don't want to talk to your system. I don't want to keep pushing buttons, whether it's talk to your bank, whether it's to call in medication, set up a doctor's appointment, talk to your kid's school, whatever it is. That we
Mhm.
have all these fancy systems, and half the time, whatever information you're looking for, typically, if it's something specific to you and not your account balance or what you owe or whatever that is, you need to talk to somebody. But
Yeah.
oftentimes, if I bought something and I'm struggling with it, I end up getting somebody from overseas. And I'm not going to be garish and, do an accent, but you'll get somebody with this thick accent and you're like, okay, I can't even understand you. And you're straining, okay, say that again. And they're
Mhm.
repeating it. And you're like, okay, I don't understand. Can I speak to your supervisor? But then their supervisor comes on and they speak just as thick of an accent or whatever it is that they're speaking.
Mm.
And so a basic job, customer service, whatever it is, there was a time, for example, I use Amazon and I love my Amazon because I order from Amazon quite a bit. But anytime I've had a package stolen, and this is true, I've had packages stolen from my purse, or from my porch, excuse me. I've had to go into my app and go into the electronic system and report it. There's a whole bunch of hoops you have to jump through. Now I could call customer service, but customer service might take me 20 minutes, and I don't oftentimes have that amount of time to wait. And the last time I had an issue with my bank, they were like, "It is a 14-minute wait." I was like, "Oh."
Mhm.
I said, "Well, guess what? I guess I'm gonna sit here for 14 minutes 'cause I need to talk to somebody because there's something going on with my car and I need to know, and there's money in my account and I need access to it." And so they thought it was some fraudulent activity. It turned out it wasn't. It was just me. And they were like, "Well, you had never shopped here before." I said, "Really?" I said, "Because if it was anybody else, you'd have let it go through." But anyway, what I'm trying to get to is there are certain jobs that no longer exist here. You don't have customer service jobs here. Even when we say, well, made in America, how many things are actually made in America? When COVID happened, we had lumber shortages. We had steel shortages. We had computer chip shortages for cars. No one could get a car. I have friends who were like, "I'm trying to buy a new car." They saying it's gonna take 16 months for me to get a car. I said, 16 months for a new car? Because we're short on computer chips. So, Dr. Angie, having said all that, what in terms of being resistant to change, which is what a lot of these people I feel are,
Mhm.
do you feel that they are hesitant or resistant to change because it's uncomfortable? Is it because they feel like it puts them at the bottom economically and they're looking at other people rising up and they just, or is it just good old plain old racism that is making them resistant to change? Or is it something else that we just don't know or haven't thought of?
You know, I think I've mentioned this in the past, and this is my bad for not looking up these gentlemen. There are two Black psychologists
Hmm.
who I've mentioned. I think I've mentioned on your show at least one other time, if not a couple times. Who several years ago, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, if something like that, um, during one of the editions of our diagnostic manual.
Hmm.
So the diagnostic man, we call it DSM for short. So it's the diagnostic and statistical manual of, psychiatric conditions, etc. So when someone says someone's clinically depressed or diagnosis of schizophrenia or whatever the clinical diagnosis is, it comes
Hmm.
out of that manual. So the
Okay.
manual is updated every it's like the Bible of the profession. Right? So counselors, social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, anyone who's giving a clinical diagnosis for a mental health condition and the physiological conditions that can go hand in hand with some of those comes out of that. So it's updated every few years. I think I'm going to say it wrong, every 5 years, every few years.
Okay.
Um, And so in one of those iterations, in one of those editions, we're on like DSM-5, TR, whatever, right now. So this was like DSM-2, DSM-4, 3, whatever, a few years ago. These two Black, I think they're both Black psychologists. I'm not sure if one of them or both were psychiatrists, but nonetheless, they're Black men in the profession. And they really worked to get racism entered as a clinical diagnosis. Because
Wow.
it's so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they they did some really good, and not just them, but there's bodies of research by other clinicians of color, other researchers, others who look at the various aspects of discriminatory thought. And discriminate, that makes no sense. Discrimination is a physical act. Prejudice is the mentality. So
Yes. Yes.
discriminatory behavior based on prejudiced thoughts and perspectives, or even if they weren't acting in a discriminatory manner, just the mentality of prejudice is it's akin to a delusion. It
Wow.
has no sense. Not based on, your skin color scares me, really, or you're better than or less than because of your skin color. So and they really put a lot of really good, sound, resourced research under this. So yeah, they did work on that. It did not, to my knowledge, it did not make it into. It's not in the last couple of iterations. I don't think it made it in there. But what they did during that time, and even and before, and and others have done before and since, within the profession, who continue to look at this and deal with this whole idea of prejudice. Um, really continue to push. And while it may not be in the diagnostic manual, we know that it informs education, it informs everything. And as we continue to learn about our history in this country and elsewhere, about how prejudiced thinking has negatively impacted everything from our physical health to medical care to school, you name it, right? So I say all that to say that I would not put an or in there in your question because the racism is so weaved. I'll admit, even though I knew, of course, I knew prejudice was around. Of course, we know that. But even in my young adult days, I thought that when I heard some Black folks talk about it, I thought it was a bit exaggerated. I thought it was a little bit exaggerated. It really, as we learn more about the real history and why certain things are the way that they are, and I really, as we are continuing to learn about just how much racism is literally weaved into the system, like why we have Medicare. Why does Medicare actually exist? That has a
Right.
history of racism and trying to stop Black people, from getting the care they need.
Yes.
Maybe they'll just die out, I
Yes.
mean, it's like as we continue to learn more and more. So I would say that particularly in this country, like you said, racism and caste systems, for your watchers and your listeners who may not know what that means, the caste system, definitely we encourage you to go, look that up and learn about that. But just a phrase or two as an explanation. A caste system means that you're basically whatever station you are born into in terms of your socioeconomic status. If you're born into a poorer, less well-off part of society, you can never rise out of that. That's where you stay. If you're born into the wealthier, you can never uh, marry down, or quote unquote, in terms of class. So it's a very rigid class system. And it sounds strange to apply that to America because people from all over, as we know, what is America known for? This idea that, in many parts of the world, India has been famous historically for their caste system, but we know that they're not the only ones. For people from all over the world, especially from countries where caste systems are very much in place, it seems like no wonder they think America is like the land of opportunity.
Right.
You can actually become, be born as Barack Obama was, it wasn't like
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't dirt poor or anything, but from his background could become the president of the United States. Like that's, you know, what do they say? Nowhere but in America. It's so strange, because we've been all about that. Anyone can,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I think if any municipality, if any country, if any place offers that, America does offer that. But let us not make the mistake of thinking that because those opportunities are perhaps more available here in some ways than in other places, that does not mean that there is our own version of a caste system.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of the, as we know, you and I've talked about, one of the ways you can see it is that no matter how high you may rise, including
Right.
President Barack Obama and the First Lady,
Mm-hmm.
Miss Michelle Obama,
Yes,
Attorney Michelle Obama,
that's
no matter
right.
how high you get,
Author
um,
Michelle Obama.
author, all of that,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. That's still, the beautiful, gorgeous, deep, rich melanin in their skin still was fodder for them to be
Yes.
put down, and not just put down, but just absolutely using their skin color as something to just, what is the word? Just the
Denigrate them, just to tear them down,
tear them
criticize
down, all
everything.
of that.
I
Yeah,
remember
absolutely.
when First Lady Michelle Obama, when her husband, President Barack Obama, were in the White House, they were coming back from Hawaii and she came out in shorts. She had just come back from vacation. I'm not saying that she shouldn't have been dressed up, but the whole notion of how dare she? She stepped off of Air Force One with shorts. They just came back from Hawaii for holidays. This
Right,
wasn't an
exactly.
official photo op. You all just ran to see what happened when the president stepped off. And
Yes.
it is, that's a different type of a bubble. Every day you have African Americans who face all different types of challenges. And specifically when we have people who will stop us. There was an absurd one I saw. This woman blocked a parking spot. She said, "This is my parking spot." And the people were like, "We are just trying to come in and park." And she literally laid on the ground. And the people that were with her were trying to get her up. And it was ugly. And she was beating the car. Or you have other people who will claim that your car is theirs. That's my car. She's stealing my car. You, first of all, don't have two front teeth. Go sit down someplace. It's just a bit much.
It's a bit much,
It's a
but
bit much.
but I'll say psychologically speaking, it makes sense if that's what's been sold and sold over and over
Yes.
again. That's the
Yes.
lie that's been told. That's the image. That's the marketing, because it's straight up propaganda and marketing. That what is a Black person, but kind of less than human. Can't really trust them because they may go off, because that's that wild side of them. They'll go off at any moment. And we know they steal, and yeah,
Right.
there are one or two good ones, but all the rest you got to
They're
watch
just
them,
the
because
worst. Yep.
yeah, just hundreds of years worth of that kind of negative propaganda, lies told about us, erasing the history. Sounds familiar.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Trying to erase it, trying to whitewash it, trying to purposely not trying to mistelling the truth of our story, all of those kinds of things. Well, I guess there would be some paranoia. And we have to remind people that of course that was done on purpose. It's done on purpose because caste systems don't maintain themselves. You have to, just like a democracy is something we have to work at every day, just like Barack Obama said. You have to work at it every day, just like President Biden says. Caste systems, or whatever system you have in place, it's something that you just can't leave the system to maintain itself. You got to really work at that.
That's right.
So if you want to keep a certain people down, you got to really keep working at that. You got to keep reiterating lies about them and all. So I would say to what you're asking, I think it's a little bit of all of it, and more of some of it than other aspects, depending on the person. So fear of economic loss for some people, like the example you were giving, if coal has been in my family and I don't want to try, go the new way. That can be, like I was saying initially, change can represent things that are scary, but it can also represent law, and it can represent loss. And some of that loss is not just to me and, in my household at this moment. It's loss of legacy. So
Mm-hmm.
if my grandfather, if Cole was what we always did, and now suddenly you're taking it away from me, that can feel like you're taking away not just a job. And I shouldn't say just a job, because a job represents, being able to feed your kids
Mm-hmm.
and house yourself and all of that. But it represents the loss of a job for people. And the fear can be very loud. We know how it is when we get nervous and scared. It
Mm-hmm.
can take some work to try to look at the positive side, because of, that fear can box you in emotionally, where you get kind of tunnel vision and you're only focusing on, oh my goodness, the negative. So whereas, like you said, President Obama was talking about the and Hillary Clinton, like you said, Secretary Clinton, all these people that were talking about solar energy, wind power, and new ways
Mm-hmm.
of new, more economic and more environmentally clean ways of promoting energy, and all of the new jobs and types of jobs that would bring. While that's true, if you're boxed in emotionally and tunnel vision on what you think you're losing and your fear about it, then you're all, for that particular person, unless you work at it, and for any of us, it can be a slippery slope of, oh my gosh, and you keep reiterating in your head, and that's all that you see and think. I'm going to lose my legacy. They're taking things away from me. I'm too old to learn this new,
Mm-hmm.
technology. I had plans for the next 5 years, and how am I going to put my kids through college? And, it just feels like loss, and more loss, and fear of the future. So when people get into that kind of mindset, it can be hard for them to hear the positive sides of it. So that's part of it for a lot of people. For some people, it may be more the legacy part, how I identify myself.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking that away from me, that, my identity is farming in this way, or whatever the case may be, they feel is being taken away. And then again, like you say, racism is weaved through all of that, particularly, well, it's, I would say particularly in our country, it's in many countries. The reason I say particularly ours is because of what we haven't done to address it
Mm-hmm.
as a country. The people have worked hard to address it,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of pushing for change, et cetera, people protesting and all that, and have pushed our federal government to make some changes. But I look at Germany as an excellent example of what they did
Mm-hmm.
post the Hitler years and all of that. I
Yes.
mean, they
World War
really,
II. Mm-hmm.
World War II, all of that. It's like, we're going to talk about this. We're going to do what it was, what will never be again, a formal apology, all of that stuff. Whereas here, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think we have yet done a formal apology
No,
in this
we have not.
for the hundreds of years of slavery. And slavery, in terms of speaking plainly, just plain speech, we can call it slavery, which it was. I like to add in the terms human trafficking, since
Mm-hmm.
that's what the country was built on. Human
Absolutely.
trafficking is what that's
Yes.
called.
Yes.
Thank you. And all the brutality. It was just a violent, brutal, horrible situation. So we've never even done a formal apology for that, let alone,
Mm-hmm.
there's been some stuff here and there, all steps are appreciated, but
Mm-hmm.
until we really grappled with it on that level, um, you know, we continue to have, well, there'll always be individuals and some groups and et cetera, but countrywide, we'll continue to have some of these really dire issues where people are resistant, as, and I say people meaning, you know, broadly speaking, resistant
Yes.
to some of this change, because it
Mm-hmm.
represents loss of way of life, and a white supremacy is the way. It's the way. It's
It
not the
is.
truth of the life. It's not the
No,
truth of
not
the way,
at
but it's the way. It is the
all.
way. It's the
As
way that things
American
have
as
been.
apple pie. It is as
Pie.
American as apple
Yes, as apple pie on every level, towards Chinese Americans, towards
pie.
Chinese
Yes.
immigrants, towards the people who are
Indigenous
native to this
people.
land,
Mm-hmm.
indigenous,
Mm-hmm.
on every level. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone who has come here, almost everyone, almost everyone, whether you back in the day, whether you were Irish, whether you were Italian, you know, whatever the case, everyone has had their experience with some of that coming to that's part and parcel of America, and you know, unfortunately. Now, people listening to this podcast might think, "Oh, there's some bitter women sitting up there." Two bitter black women. But we love our country.
Absolutely.
Black folks have always loved this country and fought for it, and you can tell because when I say the country, people might say individuals. When federal legislation says that our people are less than human.
Mm-hmm.
And we still go and fight in every war since the Revolutionary War.
That's right.
And put our heart, blood, sweat, tears, and lives into this country. That, for anyone who's not sure, that's a lot of love.
That's right.
So no one should ever question our love, for this country. But if you really love someone, you care about where they are, you care about the development and all of that. And that means sometimes if you really care, you take them to task. Mm-hmm. And we take our country to task because we really do care. And I want to say this too, that just reminded me of something I was going to say when you were speaking about Donald Trump and the Trumpers, the people who, like you said, they just love him. I want to respectfully disagree with you. I completely know what you mean by they just love him, but love does not look like
this is true. Yeah, that's true. That's correct.
Because if they really loved him, there should be some concern because he is obviously not healthy.
Yes. Yes.
If they really love, obviously not. Now, maybe some of them who are in his circle may have taken him aside and attempted to have some conversations with him. But like you said, all these Trumpers, these diehard fans, and all he does, everything he does is wonderful. Question sometimes. If you can't question the person that you're idolizing all day long and all that, and ask some questions and maybe take them to task and say, I don't know if I like what he's doing. If you can never do that, then that's not real love and care.
Mm-hmm.
He's not healthy physically and he's not healthy mentally or emotionally. And holding that Bible upside down, he's not healthy spiritually.
No, he's not.
No. Turn it around. Right side up. Even if let's say you're not a Christian, perhaps you have other belief systems. Turn it right way around.
That's right. That's right.
And for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, just Google, just look that up.
Yeah.
When Trump held in his presidency the Bible upside down.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Yes,
it was a terrible picture. But you are absolutely correct, Dr. Angie. This is why we have you on the show. And you are absolutely correct. We are not bitter. These are things that we are concerned about because we have families. There are people that look like us. And we know we all face challenges when we leave out the door every day. Yeah, having spent several days in Cuba, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful, enriching learning experience for me. But I was very happy to be back in America because there were just things that they just don't have. For example, I said they don't have screen windows. That means that every place that we went, the windows were completely open. That means whatever was outside was going to come on in. That's right. So snakes, bats, spiders, and I'm scared of spiders, so that's not a good thing for me. Yeah, no.
Oh my.
Now the hotel we were in was great, but once you left outside of the hotel, it was just like, wow. But I wanted to circle back to something because you had talked about, sometimes people focus on the negative. In Cuba, all the people that had joy, what would be something that you would stress to someone who's struggling with change? How would you sort of turn that thought around for them to think about it positively?
I would say a few things. One is what you just said. Look to other people. That's one very important step, I think, because that narrow vision I was talking about, that tunnel vision that sometimes we can get into when we're afraid and nervous and we're scared to look around and, looking up and looking out and looking around us and looking at what other people might be dealing with and taking some lessons from how they may be coping can be helpful. And is exactly like your example with the Cuban people that you saw and their joy. by the same token, or comparable to that, maybe perhaps you could say, a lot of times I hear Black folks, even recently, with the Alabama brawl. The
Oh,
Alabama
yes.
brawl. We haven't talked since the Alabama brawl. We don't
Flip my
condone
hat up.
violence.
We do
Don't
not.
condone
We
violence.
do not. We do
We
not.
do not. But I will say, I don't want to speak for you, but I will say I do condone running and trying to rescue someone who's being piled on.
Yes, I
An
agree.
individual by a whole bunch of people being beaten down for doing his job, and he was a captain. If we want to make sure we say that.
Yes, yes, he was a captain.
But
yes, please.
right, so the recent Alabama brawl, that's a good example because we saw all that creativity come, all the memes and people making jokes and writing gospel songs. I've got a few of my favorites, all the rest.
I did too.
All the videos, exactly. But while most people were really reveling, lest people get it twisted, it wasn't reveling for most people, I think, not so much, not in the violence, but reveling in, finally seeing Black folks who have traditionally and continue to be piled on and beat down by a predominant society, to finally see Black folks win the fight a little bit, while that's been the predominant reaction by white folks and Black folks, actually. I've seen a lot of white folks react that way as well.
They was like, they gonna learn.
They gonna learn. And wait, but as an aside, did you see the reenactment by the pool?
I don't know if I saw that one.
You
Oh no, I did. I saw it was a little girl. Yes,
with the white and Black folks.
He was like, he's swimming Aquaman. I was cracking up. I was like, oh my goodness. I said, y'all, it's only been 2 days. You all have reenacted.
They staged the whole thing. Exactly. Oh my goodness. Oh wow. So yes. So while like I said, white and Black, folks from all different backgrounds have had fun with it, and talked about, as well as serious conversations about why, such relief in the Black community and all of that. I have heard a few voices of Black folks who felt that, who've said things like, this is our problem as Black people. We're always cracking jokes and not taking it seriously. And the responses that I've seen when I've seen, some of those comments on a couple of those videos, I haven't seen many, but a little bit of that, folks just, stepped up and said, don't mistake the joking for not taking it seriously.
Oh, absolutely.
And talking about how people are most definitely taking it seriously. But one of the things that Black folks are known for is, this outrageous, not just sense of humor, but our ability to laugh and have joy in the most dire, horrible, inhumane, and absolutely unthinkable circumstances.
Yeah.
And that has been a strength. That's been something that has helped us to, carry us through. There's a difference between that, of course, and what people talk about when they talk about minstrelsy, of course, and the put downs in the mimicry of our people, even by our people sometimes. But that ability to laugh and have joy, like you were talking about, that you saw among the Cuban people, is a strength, and it's a part of survival. And it's a part of helping to bring and maintain joy. So one of the things I would say to people is to look at others who are suffering as well. And because we all learn from each other and see what you might learn from how they're coping and what you might see from them, like laughter. I would say I would remind people that you are strong and resilient. That doesn't mean that you're not afraid, that you don't become scared and fearful and nervous. That's all part of being human, but don't let that be the thing that defines you. Acknowledge that is a part of the experience of the fear of change and all of that, but also remind yourself of those times in your life when change did help you get further along on your journey, when change did actually save you. Or maybe you have a story from your grandfather or your mom or people in your family where making that change, making that move. So many of our families, we joke about being up here in the north of the northern part of America, that we're like one generation, maybe 2 generations away from the South, right? Because so many of our families did do that migration in the earlier part of the last century. And how scary that must have been, moving for anyone who's making a major move like that. But a lot of times we hear those family stories where it might have been difficult when they got to the north, and it maybe wasn't the land of all the milk and honey that they thought, but it may also have it opened up opportunities for people, for a lot of people that maybe they didn't have. So look around you, see what you can learn from others who are struggling. Remind yourself that laughter and having some joyfulness and trying to some humor somewhere is a strength and part of our resilience. Think about times in your own life when change I won't say wasn't scary, because change doesn't always have to be scary, but a lot of times people have a harder time with the concept that it may not be. So I would say, think of times either when change in your life wasn't scary, or when change, it may have been scary, but it turned out to be something fantastic. Going back to school, any kinds of steps that you might make in your life that you can look back and say, oh, wow, if I hadn't done that, or if I hadn't, taken that person up on their suggestion and gone in for that job interview, if you think about it, even if it was things from childhood, taking a chance, trying for something new, trying something a little different. I think we can all find at least one story or more in which those changes really ended up being positive and they helped us. So think about those things also. Other things that can help too is the unknown factor of change. Like we said, we know that can contribute to scariness for a lot of us, a lot of people. So you have facility, you have tools, you can do some things about that. Try to learn as much as you can about the change that you're thinking of making, or maybe you're not thinking of making the change, but you have no choice and the change is coming. Learn as much as you can about it. If you have access to the internet, because everyone does it, see if you can look up the situation. Maybe you're forced to evacuate. Maybe you're like we've seen in Maui, the damaging.
Terrible. Yeah. Terrible.
Oh gosh, fires, or even what's just happened in Florida, in our country with the flooding and those kinds of things. I think the more knowledge that you are armed with, a little bit less scary. It might be a little less scary. Learn in advance, or as much as you can, about resources that might be available to you, how to access them, outcomes, what other people have gone through, going through something similar to you, all of that knowledge. Learn as much as you can about the very changes that you might be nervous about. And that can be changes in relationship, whatever it is. Ask questions, try to get as much information, resources, lean on your laughter, find joy in the situation. Think about times when change did turn out to be positive. All of those things I think can be helpful.
Absolutely. What a great way to end our podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. Angie. Now, before we get out of here, you got to tell us all the things that's going on with you, where we can find you, and how we can follow you and reach you on social media.
Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for asking. Well, you can find me on most of, not all, but most of the socials out there. I am on Twitter. I am on Facebook. I am on YouTube. I am on on LinkedIn. I am also, where else am I? Well, Twitter is X now, is it? I'm on Twitter /X a little bit, still on there every now and then. I'm probably forgetting one. But yeah, just Google my name, Angela Celeste May, or Dr. Angela Celeste May. I'm all of those, both musically and in terms of the psychology part of what I do. You can find my company, A.M. May and Associates Incorporated, where we do counseling, consulting, and coaching, as you mentioned at the top of the show, with my sister, Michelle May, my business partner and sister. You can go to amassociates.com, our website. We've launched a new website. We've updated some things. We've got more updates to go, so keep coming back. You could also go to I'm on Instagram personally, as well as AMA Associates as well there. On YouTube, it's Angela Celeste May. And I primarily deal with music stuff, vocal quick tips and all that good stuff. So you can find lots of good musical content there. My album, I've got 2 CDs on Reverb Nation. That's REVERB Nation. And go to that site and you'll see, and then look up Angela Celeste May. and you can see all the songs from my 2 albums and photos and upcoming performances, etc. And you can buy those, you can purchase the singles from the 2 albums. And you can also go to iTunes for my 2nd album, which is called Reintroducing the Lady, and my book, which is Freedom. What is the, there it is. What is the experience of living without negative self-imposed limitations? That's at barnesandnoble.com. It's on Amazon. It's also, it's at Ex Libris, which is the publisher. So you can get it in all those places. And in terms of facing the unknown and to the conversation we had today, scary things, dealing with the fears and all that, my book, Freedom, what is the experience of living without negative self-imposed limitations? We definitely deal with that. I interviewed a wonderful group of very diverse people from different backgrounds and age groups who all had scary things they dealt with in their lives. And the book is really about how they went from feeling stuck to the freedom of getting free from those things and finding their own resilience. So thank you so much for asking. I am going to be performing here in Detroit on November 8th, but I'll give you that information the next time we talk, because it's going to be at November 8th. It's going to be at the Music Hall in the Aretha Franklin Cafe Theater Club, nightclub in there. That's going to be coming up for sure. And you can also contact me at any of those, inbox me at any of those, as well as Celeste MUS1. So that's CELESTEMUS and the number 1 at AOL.com. If you're interested in voice lessons or piano, because I teach voice and piano at the Marygrove Conservancy here as well. So those are some things.
Awesome, Dr. Angie. Thank you. You always have so much to share with us, so we're always happy to talk to you. Thank you again for being on the Kim B. Davis Show, and we can't wait to talk to you again next month. It's always our pleasure. Thank you guys for tuning into the Kim B. Davis Show. You know me as your host, Kim B. Davis. You can find me on all your socials: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I know it's X, but I'm going to call it Twitter because I'm defiant. LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, everywhere on social media. It's Kimberly Batchelor Davis. To see this show, you can log on to youtube.com/Kimberly Batchelor Davis. To listen to the show, you can check out Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google and Wisdom. And you can hear this show. To learn more about me as an author, check out kimbdavis.com. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you'll join us on our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.